Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants Hangout. My name is Joe Grabowski. I'll be your host for today. For those who don't know, Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants is all about bringing science, adventure, exploration, and conservation into classrooms across North America and hopefully beyond. I'm very excited today to be joined by our guest, George Kourounis. Now, George is an Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants veteran on 4 or 5 hangouts now. George is a renowned global adventurer, a storm chaser, explorer, and television presenter. He's based in Toronto, and his efforts to document some of nature's craziest weather conditions and other activities have taken him all over the globe. So when most people are kind of running away, George is heading right in to film and document what's going on. So it could be tornadoes in Kansas, could be hurricanes in Mexico, a forest fire in British Columbia, maybe even an erupting volcano. George will be there with his team. So he started chasing tornadoes and storms over 15 years ago, and his explorations have expanded from there. And George is, like I've mentioned, is a huge supporter of Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. He's one of our board of directors, and he's just a really cool guy with some great stories to share. George, it's awesome to have you joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. Hey, guys.
Go ahead, guys.
All right?
I'm going to turn the mics on. Let's get the classrooms loud this morning. How's everybody?
Awesome. Very, very cool. Thank you, Joe, for that great introduction. And it is absolutely true. I've probably got one of the coolest jobs that I could even think of when I was a kid. Professional explorer, adventurer, storm chaser. So I travel all over and document extreme forces of nature. Anytime that the earth is doing something violent or crazy, I go and document it, and then I share what I've seen with students, with videos on YouTube, with television programs. I've done a lot of work with television, hosted a bunch of TV programs, worked with Science Channel, Discovery, Nat Geo, various different television networks and such. And I just love it. I'm so passionate about it. So what I want to do today is talk to you guys about 2 particular expeditions that I've done. One was for National Geographic, and one was very recent, actually. I'm going to turn screen share on here, Joe, see if I get this right this time. Let's see here. Is this what I want? No, that's not what I want.
Looks good so far. I can see me. That's a start.
You can see you? Can you see this?
We had you for a second. Remember, it's the second one down and choose the whole desktop option. That's the least glitchy.
Yeah, that's desktop. Yeah, okay. Boom, boom, boom. And now if I go here, can you guys see a picture of a volcano?
We got a volcano.
You got a volcano. Awesome. Cool. So if I go here, boom, you guys can see that okay?
Looks good.
Awesome. So I've been to, let me see, probably about 25 different live active volcanoes around the world. And they're one of my favorite phenomena to go and document. And but when I was a kid, my heroes were guys like ocean explorer Jacques Cousteau. He was a hero of mine, world explorer, but he specialized in the underwater world. One of my other major influences was Indiana Jones. So what I was able to do is combine the love that I have of science and nature and travel, exploration, all of those things, and then turn that into a career. I'm not a scientist. I have a background in engineering, but a lot of what I do is assisting scientists. I go into these difficult and dangerous places to take readings, get samples, things like that. And those efforts have taken me all over the world, to all 7 continents, from Siberia to Antarctica, from the Sahara Desert to India, to New Zealand, Australia, Greenland, all over. And it's been an absolute thrill. One of the most interesting expeditions was in conjunction with National Geographic. I had a science grant from them to go to this place. It's in the middle of the desert in Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan is in Central Asia. Most people have never heard of this country. And in the middle of the desert, there's this gigantic hole in the ground that was accidentally caused when they were drilling for natural gas. a sinkhole formed and the drilling rig collapsed into this hole. And now it was leaking natural gas, and they lit it on fire thinking it would burn off in a couple of days. And that was back in 1971, long before most of you were born. Well, pretty much almost all of you were born. And it's been burning ever since. So my job was to go there. The locals call it the doorway to hell because it's constantly burning. It's just this amazing place. My job was to go there, gather soil samples from the bottom, and see if there was anything alive at the bottom. Now, we're not talking about creatures like alien creatures or raccoons or anything multicellular. We're talking about bacteria, microscopic things. So we didn't know because it's so very hot and just such an extreme place. And you can see how extreme this place is. It's just nothing but a burning pit in the middle of nothing in the desert. And that was our campsite for a week. I had a TV crew from National Geographic with me documenting the whole thing. And the way that we did this was I stretched fire-resistant ropes across the entire span of the crater, went out to the middle in my special heat-resistant aluminum suit with self-contained air, kind of like scuba equipment. And then I was able to rappel down all the way to the bottom. It's about 100 feet deep down to the very bottom and set foot amongst these thousands of flames. 12 people have been on the surface of the moon, but only one person has ever been at the bottom of this crater. And if you look really, really, really closely, just to the right of that gigantic flame in the center, you can see a little figure of a person. Let me zoom in here. There I am. So the idea is that I had a microbiologist with me, and I would gather soil samples. And as I was digging in the ground down there, fire would come out of the hole that I was digging. It was just this most extreme place. And we would then get that soil analyzed at a lab in Chicago to look to see if there's any kind of bacteria DNA at the bottom. And we found several types of organisms, microscopic organisms, living in the soil inside this flaming pit that were not found in the surrounding soil and were not in the existing database. So we found new life that had never been discovered before. And some of that life was actually consuming the methane gas that was being produced by this crater. So what started off as basically an industrial accident that turned into this spectacular, almost volcanic looking crater is actually the home to some of the world's most exotic, extreme life forms. And it took almost 2 years worth of planning and preparation to go down to the bottom of this crater. And I was able to spend 17 minutes at the bottom. That was it. So it was quite the expedition. And as I said, no one had ever done this before. So I had to try and figure out how to do this, how to do it safely, what equipment to use. We didn't know what the conditions were like at the bottom, how hot it was going to be. There were points where I'm standing here where the ground temperature was 400 degrees. So very, very extreme. And then most recently, here you can see here's a drone shot of a volcanic crater. This is in Vanuatu. I just came back from this expedition maybe a month and a half ago. And I spent about 7 weeks in the country of Vanuatu. It's this tiny little island nation between Fiji and Australia. It's one of my favorite places in the world. I've been there about 5 times now. And they have one of the highest concentrations of active volcanoes in the world. So as you can probably tell, I love going to these crazy holes in the ground. It's one of the things I'm just extremely passionate about. And because they're so mysterious and they can be dangerous, of course, but there's so much that we can learn from these things. And in the top left, that's our base camp where we had all of our tents set up basically on the crater's edge. And then from the edge of the crater down to the bottom is a straight drop of 400 meters. That's 1,200 feet down to where there's a lake of boiling lava. And to give you an idea, you could fit a skyscraper like the Empire State Building that skyscraper would literally fit inside that hole, and the top of the skyscraper would not stick out from the top. That's how deep this thing is. And our task was to get down inside this crater to the very edge of this lake of lava. Basically, it's almost like a space mission, because when you're down at the bottom, there's no one there to rescue you. You're completely on your own. You have to rely on your own knowledge, skills, and equipment in case anything goes wrong. And there are many dangers here at this volcano, at any volcano, but this one in particular. Falling rocks are the #1 concern, because if you're rappelling down on ropes and your rope hits a rock and that rock comes down and hits you, that is going to cause you a lot of trouble. It's going to make for a really, really bad day. Here you can see a bit of haze. This was actually a very clear day on the volcano. Most of the time there's a tremendous cloud of sulfur dioxide gas. And it is an extremely irritating gas that stings your eyes and burns your nose when you breathe it. And whenever it rains, and it rained there almost every single day, the weather there is so bad. When I'm trying to chase tornadoes, it's hard to find the bad weather. When I'm going to volcanoes, I want the weather to be good, and it almost always rains. It's just the way it is. Mother Nature can be very fickle sometimes. But when it rains, the raindrops pass through the gas cloud, and the sulfur gas combines with the rain to create sulfuric acid. So imagine being rained on with acid that just stings and just burns your skin, and any exposed metal on your cameras or your climbing equipment almost rusts almost immediately. So it's one of the most harsh, dangerous, difficult places in the world. To get up to it, we had to, there's only 2 ways to get to the summit. Either you hike for 6 hours from the closest village, or you take a helicopter. We were very fortunate that we had a helicopter bring us up. There's 1 chopper in the entire country. And here it is parked at the summit right beside our base camp. And at night, you can see the cloud of that sulfur gas I was talking about just being lit up by the lava below. So it's one of just the most spectacular sights at night. And on a clear day, you can see the stars and the Milky Way lighting up above, and then of course the gas cloud being lit up from below by the lava. And that lava could be 1,500 degrees. And again, it's 1,200 feet down. It still lights up this cloud so dramatically. But to get down to the bottom, you got to use ropes. And it takes several hours of rappelling to get down. It's very physically demanding. If you look sort of in the center, just to the left of center on the frame, you see these little figures. That's 2 of us just going over the edge. And we have to wear gas masks because the crater is completely filled with gas at this point. You can't see the bottom, but sometimes you have to rappel through the gas cloud to get down to the bottom. And that can be extremely irritating. So we have to wear gas masks for that. It's certainly a very dangerous job site, let's just say. And here's the view from part way down when the gas finally clears. This bubbling, roiling, seething lake of lava. It just changes every time I go here. I've been on 4 different expeditions to this particular volcano. And every single time it's different. The lava behaves differently. The weather is different. The bottom of the crater sometimes has these rock slides. And the geography and the topography of the bottom is different every single time I go to the volcano. So I never get bored of the place because it's always different. So this view is from about 100 meters down, just over about 300 feet or so, with another 300 meters or so to go, 300 yards to get down to the bottom. So at this point, it looks like we're pretty much on top of the lava, but we're not even close at this point. There's still a long way to go. And there's the view from the bottom. The lava splashes up with these fountains of liquid rock. It's basically like a window into the center of the earth and gives us an idea of what's going on just below our feet. If you were to shrink the earth down to the size of an apple, the crust that we live on, that all life on earth lives on, would be about as thick as the skin on that apple. So the vast majority of the earth is this very hot rock that's full of dissolved gas that we're just basically on this floating skin. It's really amazing when you think about it. It's hard to believe that we survive on this tiny skin and with this just crazy mass of lava very close underneath us, and sometimes erupting from deep below. And in order to get close, because the heat is so intense, again, my special heat protective suits that I have, I've got a few of them. And there are certain points in the volcano where you can stand only for a few seconds because it's so incredibly hot. It's like if you've ever opened the oven and you've been standing beside the oven, you get that waft of hot air. Imagine that, but times 10, and it never stops. It's just continuously going. But the view is unbelievable. One more step to the right, and it would be a straight drop right into the lava there. So part of the reason for this particular expedition was to bring an IMAX film team down to the bottom to get some of the most dramatic volcano footage that has ever been filmed. So coming up next year, keep an eye out in whatever city you live in for the new IMAX film called Volcanos. And they just finished editing it. It's getting ready to be shown in theaters. I think it comes out in March, if I'm not mistaken. So part of our task was to bring this IMAX camera down and get it in these positions to see these types of shots. And here we go. So one last thing I want to show you guys before we go to some Q&A, because I'm sure you have lots of questions, is so here's a view from a previous expedition to the exact same volcano. It actually looks a little different here because the level of the lava was much higher. And I've got a little short, like 1-minute video clip here to show you guys to give you an idea of how violent this lava is while it's boiling away. So here we go.
The bottom of Ambrym volcano.
And yes, that's me standing there.
In the world. At the same time, it's also one of the most dangerous and difficult to get to.
It sounds like being at the beach with the waves crashing, but instead of water, it's liquid rock. There you can see, there I am at the bottom. Gives you an idea of the size and scale. Pretty crazy. Let me just turn sharing off. Oops.
You're back.
I'm back. Okay. So to get some of those shots, the heat was so incredibly intense that I would have to hide behind a rock, take my camera, place it on top of the rock, let it film for 10 seconds or so, then grab the camera and pull it back down, and the front plastic of the camera was melted from the heat. That's how intense and incredibly hot it is when you're that close to liquid rock. It's almost impossible to describe unless you experience it yourself. So there are certain volcanoes around the world that you can get up close to like that, but there are other ones. For example, there's an alert right now on the island of Bali in Indonesia, where they are evacuating tens of thousands of people today as we speak, because there's a volcano there that has very sticky lava. And when you have very sticky lava, the pressure builds up, and that gives us volcanoes that tend to explode very violently and destructively, as opposed to lava that is very fluid, kind of like almost like water, not quite as thin as water, but the more fluid the lava is, the more easily it flows and the less dangerous the volcano. Places like Hawaii, you can go and you can witness the lava pouring over the side of the cliff into the ocean, and there it's not likely to have these gigantic explosions. But some volcanoes, if you're within 10 miles or more than 10 kilometers, you are within the danger zone. So everyone is unique. They all have their own personality. And I love going and visiting and documenting and studying these things all over the world.
Well, George, that's not a bad way to spend the summer.
Well, an interesting thing was when you're spending that much time on a volcano, it was literally seven weeks living in a tent in the terrible weather the entire time. You really cut off from the world. We had no news. It's like being on another planet. There's no life other than at night. An interesting thing would happen. We would have these gigantic moths that would fly up from the jungle to the summit of the volcano. Now, because of all the gas and the acid rain, there's no vegetation at the summit of the volcano. So there's no reason for these moths to come up, except they get attracted by the light of the lava at night. So you have all these moths that come up and they end up in your tent and base camp and they're flying all over the place. And they're attracted to the volcano. And we even found quite a few of them down inside at the bottom. Once they go inside the crater though, they almost immediately die because the gas is so toxic. But it's just an interesting thing how these moths get fooled into being attracted to this thing that will unfortunately kill them.
Wild. So George, when you got back after 7 weeks, like you said, almost like you were on a different planet, how tough was the adjustment to modern society again? Did you feel anything?
Well, it was kind of nice getting back into the flow of being back on social media, being connected again. Seeing my wife is always nice, of course, and eating sort of real food again, as opposed to dehydrated food. When you first go up onto the volcano to base camp, you bring fresh food with you. So the food is good for the first few days. And then after a while, you start dipping into the canned food and then eventually into the dehydrated food. So as the expedition progresses, the quality of the food diminishes. And then when you get back into the real world, it's nice to have a big juicy burger, let me tell you. A hot shower and a juicy burger.
You know, one of these days we have to do a call where we just talk about food in some of the places you visited. I've seen a few of your social media pictures where you're finding some pretty interesting stuff when you're doing some exploring.
We should totally do that. Absolutely. I've eaten a lot of weird things from all over the world. Oh, yes.
All right. Well, let's meet some of our classrooms and let's get some questions going. We're going to jump first to our classroom in Brampton, Ontario. So there's looks like probably 2 classes together, about 45 grade 5 students with Mrs. McIntosh. Let me turn your microphone on. You guys can go ahead with a couple questions.
Hey, Brampton.
Hello.
Hi.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
What gives you the guts to do what you do?
What gives me the guts to do what I do? Well, here's the thing. It's all about experience and study and training, right? I don't know how to fly an airplane. If you were to put me behind the controls of an airplane, I would be frightened, all the passengers would be frightened, and I would crash the plane because I don't know what I'm doing. But a pilot in that exact same position is confident because he knows all of the controls. He knows how to fly a plane. He understands that, right? So over the years, I've been doing this now for 20 years, and I've been to volcanoes all over the world, and I've rappelled down inside lots of them, many different ones all over the world. And so that experience tells me what equipment I need. I know when things are going to go wrong. I can see patterns with the volcano that normally people would not recognize. So it's not a matter of having guts, because I do get scared, absolutely. But it's a matter of knowing what to do in those situations. And it all comes from studying and from experience, doing it over and over and over again. So I spend a lot of my time when I'm not out in the field, I'm on the internet researching a lot of these different phenomena that I go and visit to learn as much as I can so that when I arrive at these places, I know what to expect. And yes, I do get scared.
All right, great question. I think that's an awesome point, George. I think if there's ever a day you don't get scared, that's when it's probably going to be most dangerous.
Absolutely, right? It's when you get complacent, when you get too cocky, I suppose, right? when you're not thinking about these things. And that's when accidents happen. And usually accidents happen when there's usually like 3 small things. It might be bad weather, maybe you're not feeling good, you didn't get enough sleep, maybe there's a problem with your equipment. When you have several small things combining together, that's when accidents happen.
All right, let's jump back to Brampton. Let's steal another question.
Give her. Who wants to come on a volcano expedition with me? Oh, I got lots of helpers.
What's been your favorite experience so far?
My favorite experience?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. There's so many. Certainly going to Turkmenistan and being the first person to ever set foot at the bottom of that flaming crater was one of my favorite experiences. I got married on the crater's edge of an exploding volcano, so that was one of my favorite experiences. I've been to the Crystal Cave in Mexico, which is this amazing cave that has the world's largest crystals. Some of them are 30 feet long, like 10 meters long, and weigh 55 tons. And the air inside is about over 50 Celsius. That's 120 some odd degrees Fahrenheit with almost 100% humidity. So we had to wear these special ice-filled suits. So that was an amazing experience as well. The more extreme the environment, the happier I am.
All right, Ms. McIntosh's group, both grade 5 classes, thank you so much, and we'll probably swing back to visit you again, for sure. Let's jump to our next group. So they are a grade 5 classroom in Joliet, Illinois, and they're with Mrs. Chaveria. Let me turn your microphone on.
Actually, I think I've been to your town. I'm pretty sure I've driven through there on my way to chasing tornadoes down in the Midwest.
What did you do to prepare for staying on the volcano?
What did I do to prepare for going inside the volcano?
Yes, nice and loud.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I heard that right. Well, I always work with a team of people. These type of expeditions you cannot do yourself. So I've got a really great team that I team up with. There's a guy from New Zealand, another guy from England, and we all come from all these different parts of the world, and we get together. And the 3 of us have a tremendous amount of experience and equipment and knowledge. Just to give you an idea, when you go down inside these volcanoes, it can take a couple of hours to rappel down. But then how do you get back out, right? When it's almost perfectly straight and you're inside an active volcano and you've been down inside for most of the day and you're really tired, climbing out is going to be almost impossible. So we've got this special equipment that we use. It's a gasoline-powered rope ascender. It's basically kind of like a lawnmower engine that we bring down with us, and it attaches to my rock climbing harness. We thread the rope through it. You start the engine, and it's got a throttle, kind of like a motorcycle, and it slowly helps pull you up out of the volcano. And it's kind of like your own little personal elevator. So having those, researching the equipment, knowing what you need in advance, and over-preparing is really important. We had more water than we needed. We had more food than we needed, more rope, more equipment, because things break. You cannot go to Home Depot when you're on top of a volcano in the middle of the jungle in the South Pacific, right? So you have to bring everything with you that you think you're going to need, especially if you're going to be there for a long time. So it's just lots of lists, preparing all of these little things, battery chargers, gasoline for the generators, so like hundreds of little items that you have to think of. And because we've been doing it for so many years, we know the things that are going to break. We know all of the things that are going to be problems. And even with all that knowledge and experience, it's always a nightmare of problems every single time, just because it's such a harsh environment. So yeah, it's training, preparation, lots of lists, and having specialty equipment makes all the difference in the world, and good team members.
All right, great question. Grade 5s, we're going to get one more before we visit our grade 7. So let me turn your mic on one more time for you.
Yeah. Okay. Here you go. Nice and loud and clear.
Have you ever gotten hurt?
Have I ever gotten hurt in any of these adventures? No. In 20 years of driving inside hurricanes, chasing tornadoes, climbing inside volcanoes, I've never once even broken a bone, never spent an overnight in hospital. I did get sick one time. I was at a volcano on the island of Dominica, which is the same island that just got hit by Hurricane Irma very, very badly as a Category 5. It's a beautiful island, but the mosquitoes on that island, some of them carry dengue fever, and I got bitten by one of those mosquitoes, and I was very, very sick for about 2 weeks, but I've never had an injury. I had to do a rescue of a climber just on this past volcano expedition. We had a very experienced climber, a National Geographic photographer. I won't say his name, but he was climbing down and his equipment jammed up and I had to rappel down. He was dangling from the rope on an overhang, had to go down and rescue him. At one point, I even had to I carry a knife on my climbing harness, and I had to pull the knife out and actually cut away some of the equipment that was all fouled up. So we've had quite a few hairy situations. I've had to dodge lava flying overhead, but I've never been injured. So we take safety very, very seriously. If something goes wrong, there's no hospital that's close by. So we try to do these dangerous things in as safe a manner as possible.
All right. Well, George, let's meet our grade 7. So they're joining me in the classroom. They're Mrs. Gibson's grade 7 class. And we're in Guelph, Ontario. And let's get a little look at the class. There they are. How's it going, everyone?
Guelph.
All right. Who'd like to come up and ask George a question? Okay, you're nice and up at the front. Come on up. Don't forget to let us know who you are first.
Hi, I'm Tyler. What do you like to do in your spare time?
Hey Tyler, what do I like to do in my spare time? Well, as I mentioned, I do a lot of research and preparation for a lot of these expeditions. When I come back, I usually have hundreds, sometimes thousands of photos that I need to sift through and edit, and video as well. But I'm also a musician. I play bass, so I do a lot of jamming with some friends when I'm at home. So that's a nice little distraction that I have when I'm at home. That is completely different from all of the exploring and traveling. I sometimes travel between 150 to 220 nights a year. And it's nice when I come home, I can go and play some music and jam with my buddies when I get back.
All right, who'd like to come up now? Lots of hands. Come on up. Yep. Here comes someone. Amelia.
Hi, my name is Amelia, and I was wondering what your friends and family think when you tell them that you're going on another expedition.
Great question. That's really, really great. I've been doing this for so long that it's hard to surprise my family and friends. They totally expect me to disappear whenever there's some event happening around the world. As I mentioned, my wife and I got married on an exploding volcano. So I could tell her today that I have to disappear to go to, I don't know, Bali, for example, to go to this other volcano, and she wouldn't be surprised at all. I was in North Korea earlier this year. And when I told my family that I was going to North Korea, nobody seemed really surprised. And a lot of my friends are the people that I travel with. They're storm chasers, they're friends of mine. So they are usually certainly not surprised at all. People seem to fall into two different categories when I tell them what I do. They either think it's the craziest thing imaginable or they think it's super cool. And there's very rarely any time when people fall in the middle. So luckily, my family thinks it's cool. I always promise my wife I'm going to come back in one piece. And so far I've been able to do that. And that's the plan moving forward as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Why don't you come up, bud? Yep. We'll grab one more from Guelph, and then we'll swing to some of the other classrooms again, see if they have a follow-up.
Hi,
Perfect.
I'm Ethan, and if you had to pick one place to go back to again, what would it be?
The one place I would love to go back to, return to, wow. I mentioned that Crystal Cave earlier. It's in Mexico. It's deep underground, 900 feet. It's very, very deep. But now it's flooded, and there's no way to get back to that place. It's one of the most beautiful spots in the world, but there's literally no way to get back to it because it's now below the water table. And that's one place that was a real privilege to go to. I would love to go back, but now it seems like it's pretty close to impossible to do that. But who knows? Maybe it'll happen in the future. It's funny, there are about 5 or 6 different, there's about 5 places in the world that have these permanent lakes of lava. You guys just saw one of them today, but there's several others. And of those 5 places, I've been to 4 out of the 5. There's one left that I haven't gone to, and it's on Mount Erebus in Antarctica. Very difficult to go to, but I'm hoping to get there in the future. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, grade 7s. Great questions, and we'll probably come back for at least another one. So let's head back to Brampton, and let's see if we have another question with Mrs. McIntosh's group. Your microphone is on.
Brampton!
Yeah. Hello.
Hey.
Salim.
Hey, Salim.
Do you have any cool souvenirs from your adventures?
Interesting. Yeah, I do actually. Do I have any here in front of me? No, I don't have any here. Frequently, when I go to these different volcanoes, I'll sometimes grab a rock or a piece of fresh lava, and then I'll bring it back home as a little bit of a souvenir. I don't really collect a lot of things. It's just not the kind of person I am. One thing I do collect when I travel is my boarding passes when I fly. So here's a stack of close to 450 boarding passes from whenever I take flights, because that's how much I travel. Because that's, when you're an explorer, you have to travel a lot. So I'll either bring back a rock or something like that, but nothing really elaborate. Usually I'm carrying so much equipment and gear that I don't want to bring a lot of souvenirs home.
Oh, that's very interesting. Okay.
All right, looks like somebody else is making their way back up. George, you may have noticed we had a little freeze here and dropped in, or out but back in, but it looks like the questions just kept coming.
It's the internet, that happens.
Who encouraged you?
Who encouraged me? That's a really great question. When I was a kid, my parents were very supportive of what I wanted to get into. And it's interesting, I had this very unusual path that led to where I am now. So when I was a kid, I was always very interested in science and nature. But then, as I got a little older, as a teenager, I got into studying music. And so I pursued that, went to university, studied music. Then I moved to Toronto, studied sound engineering, and that allowed me to work in recording studios. And then I started working in studios that did sound for film and television. So I got to understand how television worked. And then I would start to chase these storms on my spare time because I wanted to get back into that science and nature interest that I had when I was younger. And the people that I worked with were extremely supportive because I was able to negotiate extra time off with my employers. I was able to take all my overtime and save it as time off. Instead of getting money, I got time. You can always make more money. You can never make more time. We all have the same number of hours in every single day, whether you're me, you, Bill Gates, Richard Branson, James Cameron, doesn't matter who you are, we all have the same number of hours in the day. So to me, time is more valuable than money. So I was able to negotiate with my employers. And because I worked in television, I got to understand how television worked. So when I started to get interest, because of the explorations that I was doing, interest from TV networks and things like that, I already knew how television worked. So when I started going in front of the camera, I had all this knowledge about how the process worked, and that really helped to be successful in television. So I was able to merge television and exploration together in making all these different TV programs like Angry Planet and working on National Geographic Explorer, things like that. So it was a combination of family and employers that really were extremely supportive of me. There were times when I was at work and there'd be a hurricane spinning in the Atlantic and my boss would look at me and say, "Why are you still here? Shouldn't you be out chasing that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm out of here tomorrow. See ya." And I would just disappear. And they didn't fire me. Go figure.
That's awesome. It's always good to have good support. I think that's a pretty good lesson, that a good team behind you can really help you do what you want to accomplish.
Absolutely. And it works both ways, not just you being supported by people, but helping others by supporting them.
All right, so we're going to visit Illinois for a final question, and then Guelph, and then we're getting close to lunch hour here in the Eastern time zone, so we'll probably break at that stage. So let's jump back to Illinois. I see someone at the camera. They look ready.
Have you ever explored in Africa?
In Africa? Yes, I love Africa. I've been to Africa about a half a dozen times. Let me see. I've been to, I'm looking up at above my desk, I've got a great big map with all the pins in it where I've been. Mali, Cape Verde Islands, Madagascar, Congo, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Kenya, Djibouti, lots of different countries in Africa. There's about 54 different nations in the continent of Africa. And I've done all kinds of different explorations there. Cave exploring in Madagascar. I was in the Sahara Desert in Mali, literally in the town of Timbuktu. And I've been to several active volcanoes in Africa that also have these lakes of lava. Remember how I mentioned there were 5 places on Earth that have these lava lakes? Well, 2 of those 5 are in Africa. There's one in Ethiopia in the Danakil Desert called Erta Ale Volcano. And it's one of the hottest, driest places on Earth. To get there, you have to take camels through the desert to get to the volcano. And then another one, which is called Nyiragongo, is in the Congo jungle right near the border with Rwanda. And that one is near where the mountain gorillas are. And I've been down inside both of those volcanoes. And as a matter of fact, the team that I work with, my volcano climbing team, those guys are actually at that volcano in Congo right now. I was supposed to be with them, but I had some other obligations I had to do, some television filming, so I couldn't go on that expedition. So if I wasn't talking to you guys right now and I didn't have some other things that I had to do, I would be in Africa right now. I love visiting that place.
All right, and let's take one more question from our grade 7s in Guelph, Ontario. Come on over.
Hi, my name is Camilla, but you can call me Tammy. And I was wondering how you plan on trying to chase all the storms, all these storms and tornadoes and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, it's difficult, obviously, because we don't know exactly what's going to happen with these storms. The weather forecasting these days is so much better than it was even 5 years ago, but still, we're trying to predict the future, right? So when I chase tornadoes, there's a very specific time of year and a very specific place where I go to. The peak of tornado season is in the central US in, let's say, from mid-April until about mid-June. That's the time of year, with the peak being the last 2 weeks of May. And Tornado Alley is the spot basically from North Texas up through Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska. And they get the vast majority of the world's tornadoes. As a matter of fact, the United States, gets 75% of the world's tornadoes in that one. Most of them are in that one spot, and they can get between 800 to 1,200 tornadoes per year. Canada is a very distant second. We get about 100 tornadoes per year. So the conditions in the United States are absolutely perfect for that. Now, when it comes to chasing hurricanes, that becomes very complicated. Unfortunately for me, this particular season has been a very busy hurricane season, but I've also been very busy doing other projects. So I've been missing out on these other hurricanes, being able to go and document them. So it's impossible to be in 2 places at once, but I certainly try. Yeah. So we look at the computer forecast models, trying to predict where these storms are going to be, and then we have to try and put ourselves in those places where we think the storm is going to be at its strongest, both with tornadoes and with hurricanes. And it can be very difficult.
All right, so George, maybe one last thought before we sign off for today. with all the exploration you've done around the world, what has it taught you about taking care of our planet?
Oh, well, geez, that's the whole reason why I do this. I visit these unique spots all over the world because they are difficult and dangerous. The vast majority of the 7.2 billion people there are on the planet will never get the opportunity to see these places, these little gems in these remote parts of the world. And the more we understand something, the more we will care about it, right? We only care about the things that we understand. And so by helping the world understand these places that they don't see very often, I hope to inspire them and to get people to realize, wow, this Earth is full of these really cool places, these amazing spots, and it's worth protecting, right? So I want to inspire people to A, appreciate the Earth, protect it, and also at the same time, step outside of their own comfort zone and maybe go and do something that they might find a little scary, right? If I can do this, if I can go inside an active volcano, then maybe you can go and go explore part of the world as well and help you appreciate the beauty and majesty that is out there.
All right, that's awesome, George. And speaking from experience, I think you are absolutely doing that. The footage you bring back and the excitement and the passion that you share with students, as well as anybody else who sees any of your work, I think it's infectious, and I think you're having that impact. So thank you so much for always having the time to hang out with classrooms and to share your passions. I'm sure we have some future scientists, adventurers, and explorers watching along today.
Awesome. And there's plenty of cool new projects in the works.
That's right. There's tons left to explore, discover.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys.
All right. So I'm going to turn the microphones on, let the classroom say goodbye and thank you. So let's get loud before lunchtime here, guys. Nice and loud. Microphones are on. All right. Thanks, everybody. It's been fun. We're signing off for today. Thanks, George.
Thank you.